Hello, this is Papa B reading, and I am going to be reading to you the last chapter of The Magician's Nephew, which is a book in the complete chronicles of Narnia, published by HarperCollins, which was written by C.S. Lewis. And this chapter is titled The End of This Story and the Beginning of All the Others. I begin. You need no rings where I am with you, said the voice of Aslan. The children blinked and looked about them. They were once more in the wood between the worlds. Uncle Andrew lay on the grass, still asleep. Aslan stood beside them. Come, said Aslan, it is time that you went back. But there are two things to see first, a warning and a command. Look here, children. They looked and saw a little hollow in the grass, where a grassy bottom, warm and dry. When you were last here, said Aslan, that hollow was a pool. And when you jumped into it, you came to the world where a dying sun shone over the ruins of Charn. There is no pool now. That world has ended, as if it had never been. Let the race of Adam and Eve take warning. Yes, Aslan, said both the children, but Polly added, but we're not quite as bad as that world, are we, Aslan? Not yet, daughter of Eve, he said, not yet, but you are growing more like it. It is not certain that some wicked one of your race will not find out a secret as evil as the deplorable world, and use it to destroy all living things. And soon, very soon, before you are an old man and an old woman, great nations in your world will be ruled by tyrants who care no more for joy and justice and mercy than the Empress Jadis. Let your world beware. This is the warning. Now for the command. As soon as you can, take from this uncle of yours his magic rings and bury them so that no one can use them again. Both the children were looking up into the lion's face as he spoke these words, and all at once they never knew exactly how it happened. The face seemed to be a sea of tossing gold in which they were floating, and such a sweetness and power rolled over them and entered them that they felt they had never really been happy or wise or good or even alive and awake before. And the memory of that moment stayed with them always, so that as long as they both lived, if ever they were sad or afraid or angry, the thought of all that golden goodness and the feeling that it was still there, quite close, just round some corner or just behind some door, would come back and make them sure deep down inside that all was well. Next minute, all three of them, Uncle Andrew now awake, came tumbling into the noise, heat, and hot smells of London. They were on the pavement outside the Ketterleys' front door, and except that the witch, the horse, and the cabby were gone, everything was exactly as they had left it. There was the lamppost with one arm missing. There was the wreck of the hansom cab. And there was the crowd. Everyone was still talking, and people were kneeling beside the damaged policeman, saying things like, he's coming round, or how do you feel now, old chap, or the ambulance will be here in a jiffy. Great Scott, thought Diggory, I believe the whole adventure's taken no time at all. Most people were wildly looking round for Jadis and the horse. No one took any notice of the children, for no one had seen them go or noticed them coming back. As for Uncle Andrew, what seemed the state of his clothes and the honey on his face, he could not have been recognized by anyone. Fortunately, the front door of the house was open, and the housemaid was standing in the doorway staring at the fun. What a day that girl was having! So the children had no difficulty in bustling Uncle Andrew indoors before anyone asked any questions. He raced up the steps before them, and at first they were very afraid he was heading for his attic and meant to hide his remaining magic rings, but they needn't have bothered. What he was thinking about was the bottle in his wardrobe, and he disappeared at once into his bedroom and locked the door. When he came out again, which was not for a long time, he was in his dressing gown, made straight for the bathroom. "Can you get the other rings, Pa?" said Diggory. "I want to go to Mother." "Right. See you later," said Polly, and clattered up the attic stairs. Then Diggory took a minute to get his breath, and then went softly into his mother's room. And there she lay, as he had seen her lie so many other times, propped up on the pillows with a thin, pale face that would make you cry to look at it. Diggory took the apple of life out of his pocket, and just as the witch Jadis had looked different when you saw her in our world instead of in her own, so the fruit of that mountain garden looked different too. They were, of course, all sorts of colored things in the bedroom, the colored counterpane on the bed, the wallpaper, the sunlight from the window, and Mother's pretty pale blue dressing gown. But the moment Diggory took the apple out of his pocket, all those things seemed to have scarcely any color at all. Every one of them, even the sunlight, looked faded and dingy. The brightness of the apple threw strange lights on the ceiling. Nothing else was worth looking at. You couldn't look at anything else, and the smell of the apple of youth was as if there was a window in the room that opened on heaven. "Oh, darling, how lovely," said Diggory's mother. "You will eat it, won't you, please?" said Diggory. "I don't know what the doctor would say," she answered, "but really, I almost feel as if I could." He peeled it and cut it up and gave it to her piece by piece, and no sooner had she finished it than she smiled and her head sank back on the pillow and she was asleep, a real, natural, gentle sleep, without any of those nasty drugs, which was, as Diggory knew, the thing in the whole world that she wanted most. And he was sure now that her face looked a little different. He bent down and kissed her very softly and stole out of the room with a beating heart, taking the core of the apple with him. For the rest of that day, whenever he looked at the things round him and saw how ordinary and unmagical they were, he hardly dared to hope. But when he remembered the face of Aslan, he did hope. That evening he buried the core of the apple in the back garden. Next morning, when the doctor made his usual visit, Diggory leaned over the banisters to listen. He heard the doctor come out with Aunt Letty and say, and that ends the first part of chapter 15, which is called The End of This Story and the Beginning of All the Others. Please come back and let me read to you again.